Right. So when you're making a hypothesis, you can't just make any old statement. You want to make a good hypothesis. And there's really one main thing that makes a good hypothesis, and that it's testable. So it has to be some kind of testable hypothesis. You have to be able to set up an experiment to either support your hypothesis or to refute your hypothesis. And so it has to be falsifiable. Which means that you have to be able to do some kind of experiment that's going to prove it wrong. And it has to be specific enough. Again, that kind of goes with the falsifiable, but you have to be able to plan an experiment for somehow. So maybe your hypothesis is that dogs are better than cats. Right? That's not a very good hypothesis. And the reason that that's not a very good hypothesis is that better is simply not specific enough, right? What does better mean? How are you going to set up for an experiment that means something is better, right? So you need to be more specific there, right? Maybe you want to say dogs are more friendly or faster or something like that, something more specific. Another hypothesis that you can come up with maybe is that a monkey can write Shakespeare if given enough time. Right, that'll put a monkey with a typewriter, eventually it'll write Shakespeare. This is also not a good hypothesis, right? What does enough time mean, right? If you say that, oh, well, it's an infinite amount of time, then that's not a testable hypothesis. You don't have an infinite amount of time. Maybe another hypothesis that you have is that all birds can fly. This one's a pretty decent one, right? This one we can actually test. We can find some birds and then we can see if they fly. And then we'll find that some birds can indeed fly, so that'll support our hypothesis. Of course, eventually you're going to find that some birds cannot fly, and so you'll delete out that hypothesis, right? So that one's okay. Again, really the main thing is that it's testable. And again, another main core component of hypothesis is that when we test them, we can never prove things right. So we can never prove things right. We can only gain support for them. So for example, if we're taking the all birds can fly, then we can take a look at a bunch of birds and see if they can fly, right? So let's say we take a look at a pigeon. A pigeon can indeed fly. So we're thinking, okay, that supports our hypothesis. We take a look at a dove. That dove can also fly. So again, that supports our hypothesis, right? So based on these two kind of experiments or what have you, we support our hypothesis. Note that, however, we don't prove our hypothesis. Right, and that's a big difference. We say our hypothesis now has more evidence for it. It's still plausible, but it's not 100% correct. However, although we can't prove a hypothesis, we can disprove our hypothesis. Right, so we can find an example where it's just going to make our hypothesis totally wrong. So for example, the all birds can fly. You go to the North Pole and you check out a penguin, right? Penguins, of course, cannot fly. So now our hypothesis is wrong. And of course, when your hypothesis is wrong, what you need to do is then revise. So again, what you want with a good hypothesis is that it's testable, which means that we can gain support for it, or we can disprove it.